Shalom, Yashala, Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to the Most High Yahweh. Do so in the name of His only begotten Son, Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Yashar Allah. Call Haloyim La Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai. Bahasham Harakah Kodash for blessing our elders with the spirit of truth so that we may know. Shout out to the Akim and the Akwat that's keeping the faith in the works. Y'all keep at it. It's your brother Abaya coming at you with more quoted precepts. Our scripture tells us to study to show thyself approved. So you have to study the word in order to get the truth. You have to be taught by righteous men who the Lord has chosen to deal with this truth in order to be led not astray but on the right path. So I wanted to speak on this Cornelius position, which is Cornelius is an Israelite. When you go into the book of Acts, chapter 10, and you go into different characteristics that's been spoken of about Cornelius. And I know that the big to do is people saying that Cornelius was an Edomite for whatever reason. And the reason why is because Scripture says he was a part of the Roman military. So when individuals hear anything Roman, they automatically assume that it's speaking about a heathen, and it's not. Paul himself was a Roman, right? Meaning he was born in Rome. He was a citizen of Rome, but he was an Israelite. The same thing with Cornelius. When you go into Scripture saying he was a devout man. There's not one Edomite on earth that's a devout man, right? Meaning you're devout to the word, law, statutes, and commandments of the Lord, right? Scripture defines Esau, Edom's characteristic as being the wicked, right? Even his forefather Esau was wicked. He didn't care nothing about, the promises and everything attached to those promises, which are keeping the word of the Lord, which is something that Cornelius was. So it's impossible for this man, to be an Edomite. And people say the same thing about Job for whatever reason, right? Job was an Edomite, right? Just utter nonsense, man, right? And speaking about Cornelius being a citizen of Rome, being in the Roman military, but not considering himself to be an Israelite, all you gotta do is go into the book of First Maccabees. Go into the book of First Maccabees and read about how, the Greco-Roman ways, really more so Grecian than Roman ways, were forced on us, the same as the transatlantic slave trade had, westernized ideals, doctrines, religions, and so forth and so on forced upon us. It's the same thing, right? It was against the law for us to pronounce ourselves as, the Lord's people. It was against the law for us to speak our native language. So basically the knowledge of self got taken away from us, right? And I would imagine during the time of the Greco-Roman era, that they probably got inspired by the precepts in the scripture that tells Yasharallah we would lose our identity, we would lose ourselves, and they probably thought that was the time for it to come to completion. But it was more so, it was then too, but it was more so as a whole, speaking about us in the transatlantic slave trade. It's the same thing. From the book of Maccabees to the book of Acts, the time span of that is approximately 200 years, right? So think about it like this: in 1619, when we, as in so-called blacks, were beginning to come over here as slaves, it only took about approximately 200 years, for us to have that same mentality and then be in the same position, right? Us getting into, Esau, Edom's military, whether you was a part of the North or the South, right? And fighting on behalf of Esau, Edom, right? And you probably had the same mindset of individuals that's spoken of like Peter. Peter was looking at And Cornelius, like, a sellout. Basically, he was a uncircumcised, individual until the Lord gave him that vision, right? To let him know now that's still my people. That's still Yasharallah, right? Even though, yeah, he in the Gentile mindset, still that's my people. He's clean. You can't call him unclean because he is my people, right? And I say the same thing. It's the same thing in these times, right? Like I said, approximately 200 years from the time of Maccabees to the time of, around about the book of Acts, where, Cornelius is even being spoken of, right? So, and I also say that to say this: if you're gonna study the scriptures, man, there's no way you can just study the Bible and come to a proper conclusion of things, right? Because first and foremost, the Bible is written in English. The modern KJV is written in English, right? Or the KJV period is written in English, but it comes from the Hebrew. It comes from the Greek, right? It comes from the Latin as it pertains to, I want to say the Apocrypha. So a lot of these words, they don't mean the same thing in English. They hold different meanings altogether. So if you're going to really study the Bible, you got to study the Hebrew of certain words. We got to study the Hebrew. You got to study the Greek in order to understand what the scriptures are speaking of, right? Just like the term Gentiles, how people automatically assume the term Gentile always means that it's speaking about a non-Israelite nation, and that's not so, right? You go into the definition of the word, which I want to say is ethnos. I could be wrong, but I want to say ethnos. Sometimes it means Hellenized, right, or Hellenized, right? And if you go into these terms, and you'll come to find out it's not always speaking on a non-Israelite person. That's when you really studying, man, right? You really getting into where the scriptures come from. It says it in the prologue to the book of Sirach. Some of these words, the words that have been translated, don't hold the same power because it's a different spirit in the word, and it's a different definition as it pertains to the word. Just like in the English, you have some words that have 3-4 definitions. It'd be the same word, but it has different definitions behind the word, right? It's the same thing in our language, which is, Ibar or, Hebrew, right? One word may mean, it may hold different definitions to it, right? So don't be fooled by these different individuals that's been set up by Esau, Edom, to try to sway the minds of the people, right? Because at the end of the day, if you are of the Lord's elect, there is no swaying of the mind, period, right? But you also want to make your calling and election sure, so that an individual can't just present something to you and say that this means that, and you don't have a defense to it. You got to have a defense. That's why Scripture tells us put on the whole armor of the Lord. You got to put on the whole armor. A part of that armor is the gospel. The gospel is the word. So you got to go into the word and find out what these words mean in order to be able to defend yourself against wayward doctrines, right? Against the wicked individuals crept in unawares, or against false teachers, false prophets. Go study to show thyself approved, so that you'll know, right? And won't nobody be able to sway you from what you know, right? And I say all the time, this truth is not about how you feel about things. It's about the truth, and the truth stands alone. It don't need backing, because it's the truth, right? The truth is the truth. All right, so Yahweh Shemi al Shah Ratazar, these quoted precepts were edifying, and this video epistle was as well. All right, so with that, I say, call Loyim La Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai Bahasham Harakal Kodash and the Bible Ball.